If you don't want to do that, I have
No, let's get to that.
Okay.
So I can hear you all, the draft minutes. There you go.
Did Doc not come in tonight? Dr. Lewis not coming tonight?
He was fighting with Jimson weed on the, when they were harvesting the weeds. The Jimson was going all destroyed cases, harvester. And they were out there with knives cutting it off.
Gee whiz, that sounds like fun.
YouTube stream is up and running.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Welcome to the Comprehensive Rezoning and Update Task Force meeting for November 10th. I'll do a roll call. First off, Kim may be on the line. I don't know, but it's hard to chair she's out of town, but she may be with us. Al Nickerson?
Here.
Bill Norris?
Here.
Bill Sutton?
Here.
Ryan Greenwood? Ryan Greenwood?
I think he's saying up remote.
Okay. So, Buck Nickerson?
Here.
Chicky Sajwani? Cindy Genther? James Saunders? Okay. Here, Kim Cole? Pat Langenfelder?
Here.
Paul Ruge?
Here.
Sam Shogay?
Here.
Tom Mason?
Here.
Tyler Brown?
Here.
Thank you. All right, I don't think we have to go over our rules, but let's have a fair and open discussion for the meeting and listen to all persons. And I'll entertain a motion to review the summary of the last meeting. If there are any amendments, corrections, please offer them. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, not to be picky, but I think Trey Hill was remote in that last meeting. And when they're listing people who attended remotely.
Correct. Anything else? Anyone offer a motion with that correction?
What was the correction again?
When under the listing of the names of who attended on the first page of the summary, Trey Hill was listed, and the word remote was not behind his name.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
Your motion? Second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you all. Okay, our first item, of course, is the discussion of the last, where is that here? Yeah. Bill Norris. Under old business, do we have any comments or questions about the public forum, comments to the task force recommendations about the hearing? Is there anyone have anything they would like to review or go over based on last meeting, public hearing? Okay, hearing none, how about on the proposed task force recommendations? Okay, thank you. Oh, excuse me.
Can I say one thing
Yep.
about all of this? And I kind of discovered this recently, is that I think there's a little bit of uncertainty amongst the members, the citizens of the county and stuff, really what is the 10% rule means. And I think that my discovery is that the 10% rule deals with strictly agricultural land, not RCD, which is the critical area land. And am I correct, Carla?
It applies only in
Only
agricultural
the
zones.
10%, only the
in
10%
ATV.
rule is just in ag. So I think that that's an important to me, it was very important to learn a little bit more, to study it a little bit more. And I think that part of a lot of the issue where we might not be getting as much feedback and everything as I think we should get, is because I think that still people don't understand what the ramifications are for certain issues that we're talking about. And again, I want to emphasize, if they don't find this out when they come in here or into the planning commission to get something done. And I think that it would help everybody in the community to have a little bit more, somehow, some way, a condensed summary version of whatever we're talking about. I don't know, it just needs to be clarified a little more. I mean, I'm somebody on the task force, I'm somebody that's been going into the planning and zoning office for 40 years, doing things, involved in it on a day-to-day basis, and I'm still finding stuff out. So that's a little, I really don't know what my answer is or anything, but I think that that's something that needs to be worked on somehow. Letting people know. Because I didn't know till today that the 10% rule only strictly involves agricultural land. And I think that makes a huge difference on different, there's a lot of RCD land in County, Maryland. So that makes a difference.
And I want to clarify what you're saying is that the 10% rule only applies to land zoned within the agricultural zoning district. Because there's agricultural land as a use
Correct.
all over the county.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I mean. Agriculturally zoned land
Yes.
is where the 10% rule applies. And if so much of that agricultural land is owned by farmers and people that are going to continue to farm it and their families farm it, and that's a wonderful thing. I don't think it's that big a threat to take the 10% rule off to what our county is. I'm sure I get some opposition to that, but there's also, I also get a lot of support for that. And I have people that are just now finding out what all this means. And there are people that have written letters to this commission stating that certain things that they didn't even understand what was going on. And I think that that's a problem. So, Bill, go ahead, I'm finished.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of confusion. And people just need to be a little better educated, maybe. I would believe she should take a tally or a vote or whatever. I think you find from people that have spoken in here, reference to the 10% rule would be probably a toss-up. One's who wanted to retain it, one's who wanted to scrap it.
So I think we're going to be discussing this with a staff recommendation later. I think that's something to talk about. I mean, as far as people wanting it and people that participated, people made comments. I think that's their comments stand. The understanding what they have, it's something we can't, I think we have a lot of people in the task force that don't have enough, don't see it every day like our planning staff does, so that until they get a project, that's when they find out. But I think it's been discussed enough, whether people understand. I don't know what you can do about that.
Well, I think it's important that you do understand and that everybody does understand.
Well, it's certainly been discussed enough that if you're participating, the people participating, I think, understand. As far as the public, that's part of our issue with all zoning, is people don't ever react till they have a need, and then they find out the rules. But I don't know how more open a public forum we can have than this. But we'll be discussing it later anyway. So, anyone else comments on that or any other subjects? Okay. Go ahead, Bill.
There are other categories that need some fine tuning and they have to be rezoned, they're gonna have to be with conditions. It's just be, for this, not to belong tonight a meeting, but to be some of the things like, we have chickens, people want chickens in the yard, or they gotta have a chicken coop. And so some of them want to put their language with sheep, and goats. Those fellows all gotta have a place to make the winter, so it's more than just have to say, I've got permission to raise them. That may be more of a hassle. And once you go through a winter or so, and they'll become the pets, so they can't slaughter them, but.
Well, that's certainly, we can only do so much from the planning department about that, but I agree with you, there's a lot of.
And it's the same as chickens, you know, you gotta get rid of all the roosters, because they're crowing in the morning and wake up the people. They wake up the neighbors, and then they're all in hot water.
Yeah, let's,
That's it.
well, hope we can respect everyone in the zoning process, that's all property owners and neighbors. Under, I guess we'll move to new business and discussion of the condensed code format. Is that Carla, Bill? That's not one word, Carla or Bill, I'm sorry.
See the mask come off, right?
Oh, that's how you.
All right, so. We've taken on the task of trying to take our current zoning text and reformat it in the way that the consultant has proposed. And so if you've taken a chance to look at it, you'll see that like the individual zoning districts just sort of have kind of a shortened list, not a short list, but the uses themselves have kind of been truncated as to what they are. And then the bulk standards, and you get reference to a couple of new sections where all of the full text of the uses is. There isn't any new information in this condensed version, so it's really just a formatting of everything we have now. And the memo pointed out that particularly for the uses, there is text that was drafted at different periods of time as the rezoning occurred, and it wasn't kept consistent throughout that process. And so the example I used here was for agriculture, where there are like 3 different versions of it, and depending on which zoning or district you're in. Another good example is in, I think it's either public or private stables, where in AZD, for example, it might say the keeping and housing of animals, and in all of the other districts that allow stables, it just says structures for housing. So, I mean, there are a couple of just minor kind of changes in wording that we tried to highlight that we will eventually work through. The other big thing that, as we've discussed, is we're going to try to take the critical area standards and put them all together into one section. We've already discussed some ways that we want to make changes to that, to add in some new processes and make it easier to do some things. And I guess I just want to know if you have questions, if this looks to be in the direction that you expected it to go based on the presentation we had from Sean Suter several months ago. If anything really stood out to you as you don't like, you do like. I don't know if Mr. Mackey has anything else he wants to add. While he's getting set up, I'll say that sort of our next step is going to be this becomes our base document that we will now start working from, both on our side with text changes that have been discussed by the task force, and on the consultant's side with sort of best practices that he has come across, or putting in the new pictures, images to better describe some of these things so that we'll have both text descriptions and visual descriptions. And I think Mr. Mackey has a couple of things to add.
Yep, I just want to publicly commend you, Carla, for the incredible amount of work that you put into this document. I know that you spent many weekends, many evenings, a lot of your own time putting this together, and I appreciate it. Condensing a code and saving 100 pages is quite something else. So thank you, and your attention to detail with highlighted notes. I think it's very easy to walk through this document and understand what's happening, which is important, just like Mr. Norris noted, having people understand things is important. So thank you very much for that. I just wanted to publicly acknowledge your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl and Bill. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to add to that just a couple of words. Carla is a perfectionist. It's not done wrong, it's done right. Enough said.
Thank you.
Stand up, Carl.
I think I'm already turning beet red, so.
Thank you, Bill, for that. Any other comments on the formatting or the condensed form from the task force?
And I'll add, we have printed a hard copy, so if anybody wants to stop into the office and look at it on paper, just let us know. It'll be available. I know sometimes it can be hard to read these documents online. That is ultimately our goal, though, is that it will be more like some of our neighboring counties with an online version, and you would just sort of extract the sections that you need.
Any comments from the public? Please step forward.
I actually just have a couple of questions, Carla.
Mm-hmm.
I think this looks really good, and I'm impressed that you did this format and condensed it down. If I remember correctly from the illustrator, I didn't go back and look, from what he put forward that he was going to do, he was putting in some tables. This is just the base, and those things would be added, as well as illustrations.
Correct,
So,
yes.
And then this is the base document, and from what the task force does, this is what is original to our code currently, and what the task force decides or how they move forward, those will be the changes, and then those will be incorporated into that final formatting that the consultant showed us. Am I correct?
Yeah, so, and our intention is that from this point forward, changes will be done in track changes. So anybody will be able to look at it and see, who made the change, when the change was made, as far as like text goes. Now, obviously, if we continue to catch the typographical errors, we might just correct those so it doesn't get too bogged down in lots of track changes. But anything that is substantive will be track changed.
And that's only during this process. The track changing won't occur once the code is adopted.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments from the public or online? Go ahead.
I just had a question. General farming, what is that? I mean, what definition are we using for general farming? I mean, that's in here. I mean, some of these, are very specific, orchards, groves, nurseries, but general farming could be most anything, I'm assuming.
Oh, you're talking about how it says under ag?
Yes.
Where it says agriculture, including horticultural, hydroponics, general farming, orchards, groves, or nurseries. Right. General farming, I think, would typically be interpreted to be row crops. So sort of your standard agricultural, small grains, hay.
Well, maybe that should be changed to row crop.
Well, I mean, it's meant to include more than just row crop. I'm trying to see.
farming's a pretty broad term.
Pardon?
Yes, it is.
I said farming is a very broad
Right.
term. General farming's even more broad.
Right. I mean, when I think of general farming, I think of that person who has row crops and he has hay, he has some animals, he has a little bit of everything. And I mean, the farm of 50 years ago, a lot of farms aren't like that today. They're more specific. You know, a lot of row crop farmers don't have animals. Animal farmers usually have row crops. I mean, I just, for clarification, I was just wondering if it still would be, I mean, I'm not trying to pick at what you did by any stretch of the imagination, because I would reiterate, I mean, I think Bill and you and Mark, everybody, your whole staff has done really a fantastic job in this and also just with all your other work and planning.
Well, I guess, Mr. Mason, what I would say is that I can take a note as to whether or not general farming needs to be better defined, and again, indicate that this is what's currently in the ordinance. And
Right.
so, yes, this would be the time to say, okay, you know, maybe we need to make a change to that. We will make a note of it, and then as we continue to move forward, we can address those kinds of concerns or questions.
Yeah, okay.
Very good. Any other comments? Thank you, Carlin, Bill. All right. Hearing none, we will not take a break. I don't think we might as well move to the 10% rule.
Okay.
And who
Joe,
go ahead, Bill.
One question I have, I don't fully understand, is what they call floater district, speaking up of the Littleton area.
Floating zones.
Floating zones.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if you wish, I can give a very brief
Okay, thank
explanation of what a floating zone is. So a floating zone is a zone that is not mapped, but described, and is a process by which an applicant can ask to have that zone applied to his property. So the idea is that it's an available zone that a public process can apply to the land without going through change and mistake or one of those processes. So a lot of times things like planned unit developments and other flexible zoning districts have those kinds of floating zone requirements. A lot of times there's specific conditions. It has to be so many acres. It has to be in a certain location, perhaps, things like that. So it's sort of a potential zone in the code, might be the way to look at it. So you can't go to the map and find it until somebody applies for it, and then it gets added to the map after someone's applied.
And then once it gets added to it, you can't pull it back out and change it to something else down the road.
Right. The idea is once it's added, then generally a development is for most floating zones, there's some product that happens, and then that's permanently there on the land. I mean, theoretically, right, I mean, zoning is legislation. Anything can be reversed, but generally it's not once it's applied, unless it expires and no one uses it. So.
And the other thing is, it's not the first time it's happened. That none of it is not all on the same train. We speak about this area when they want to develop.
Okay.
So, it's not the first time I've seen that.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, both of you, Bill. Carla, you want to
Sure.
take over? Thank you.
So the next item of discussion related to the 10% rule is our first attempt to take the discussions that we had, the broad discussions we had about each kind of text request, and to start drafting actual language that could be included in the ordinance. When the task force discussed this on August 25th, I don't know that there wasn't complete consensus among the task force members on what to do. it was divided, but I guess our staff's feeling is that overall there was support to keep the 10% rule, but allow some mechanism for flexibility. And so that is the language that we've drafted. We are proposing a couple of, an addition to the footnote that will clarify that adjustment of lot lines to lots approved prior to August 1st, 2003 are not subject to the 10% rule, which is a practice that, an interpretation that the planning department has used over the years. So we're just kind of codifying that very explicitly. And then setting up a section within the variances and waivers section of the ordinance that would establish a brand new waiver process for maximum percentage of a property and lots. We did some brainstorming and came up with sort of two alternatives. One is to have kind of a administrative review process for the subdivisions or potentially adjustment of lot lines that can be reviewed by the planning director and the technical advisory committee and don't need to go through a public hearing process. Examples of those would be properties that are bisected by a road, properties that are being divided or based on some sort of natural feature, instances where an adjustment is adding land into an adjacent farm. That would the planning director or the planning director's designee would have the option of sort of shifting that up to the planning commission if they felt, you know, there's something about the application that needs additional review, but it's to try to allow for the simple cases to just quickly be processed and let those applicants complete their projects. The ones, if situations that might be more complicated, such as dividing a property for estate purposes, or for, I've got to, there was something else.
Specialized ag operations.
Specialized ag operations, yes. Those would go up to the planning commission for review to determine if it is appropriate to allow a subdivision for a lot that exceeds the 10% rule, 10% of the property, but is not the full 100 acres. Both of these would start by, you know, the applicant submitting the application with the supporting documentation. It would go to our technical advisory committee for an initial round of review, which all projects do anyway. And then if it's going on to the planning commission, notice would be sent to adjacent property owners. The property would be posted, and then it would be heard by the planning commission. The recommendation is that it would only take a simple majority of the planning commission as opposed to like road waivers, which currently take a 2/3 majority. So again, we're trying to allow for the flexibility to allow some review if necessary, but also not make it onerous to either the planning commission or to the applicant. The language that we used, what you had in your packet, just for your informational purposes, sort of what's labeled as A, and I'm on page 8, gives you what the current waiver process is for waivers of subdivision, private road, road front lots, the protected lands, lot line setback, and some other design standards, so that you could compare that to what we've put in section B, which is the highlighted under the maximum percentage of property and lots. It includes some of the same kind of provisions that would allow for the planning commission or the planning director to add conditions if necessary, discusses if there's a lapse of the waiver, if somebody doesn't follow through with their project, if they need to amend it, or if it needs to be appealed.
Thank you. Staff task force members, any questions for Carla or comments or information you'd like to add?
Hey, Joe, it's Paul Rudy.
Okay, Paul, go ahead.
It's not really about the plan, but as much as what is the technical advisory committee? What and who is that?
That is a review body that is made up of planning staff, health department, public works, state highway, DNR forestry, kind of any local or state agency that is involved with regulating land development projects.
So they would meet, or it would be just individually you'd send out what was happening?
No, the
Ask for
technical
comments.
advisory committee, has a standard designated meeting time. It's getting ready to go to be the second Wednesday of the month. And the surveyors and engineers know what the submittal deadline is. We prepare an agenda, we send out a packet. Then we have a meeting where representatives of the appropriate agencies can provide their comments, discuss projects, learn more details, and then we send out a set of minutes. So it's really a mechanism to look to see, does a project meet the requirements of our ordinances? Are there things that need to be corrected? For minor projects, they correct them and then they bring them in and we approve them. For the projects that go onto the Planning Commission or Board of Appeals, it's a mechanism to make sure that the applications are complete and we have everything that's required before we bring it forward for a hearing.
When they come before the planning board, do we get those comments?
Yes, you do. In
Okay.
your staff report, it's always, we provide you with the regulation, and then underneath, we always say staff and TAC comments.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize, I must miss the
That's fine.
fact comments part, but
It's
something
not
I wanted
always,
to know.
it's not always super clear whether or not it's a comment that's coming from staff or somebody else from the technical advisory committee. Sometimes it is, like if the health department has a very specific comment, then we'll attribute that to the health department, or state highway, that kind of thing. But it's our way of yes, including all of those comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any task force members? Pat, go ahead, please.
Yeah, what I would like to comment is I really appreciate the fact that staff has listened to the comments, both pro and con, and some middle of the road comments as well, and put together this this recommendation. It seems to take into advice some of the issues that had gone prior when, you know, the 10% rule came into play and didn't allow for certain things to occur, which now under this situation, those would probably be allowed. Of course, they'd be reviewed, but that's the purpose of. We still have the 10% rule in place, but there are ways to have waivers around it under certain conditions. And yet, you know, you go to either the planning director or the planning commission, depending on whatever the situation is. But I would commend all the hard work that went into this and the fact that you were listening to all the comments that were being made. And I truly do believe this is a good compromise position.
Thank you, Pat. Any further members of the task force? Yes, Bill.
I remember one other one that was surveyor, he was a member of this task force. He wanted to suggest that we get surveyors have gotten more modern equipment, but it doesn't flow through rate or something because this our Carla can answer that. Our equipment's not up to date. They're using old time stuff which takes more time to get the job done, so I don't understand the testimony.
Okay, well, I think if, you know, I know the engineers, surveyors that we see here, Buck, of course, being, you know, they're pretty up to date. And I think the staff, I think there's, okay, but you're able to access the same information.
I think so. I'm not sure what Mr. Sutton is referencing. Was it maybe related to measuring buffers?
He was just testifying at one of these meetings, and I remember that's one thing I took home from his spiel, that we need to get monitored on our side, because in his business, he's picking up, getting more monitored than we are, so. It led me to believe that maybe they don't line up. Equipment in here and equipment that surveyors have.
Okay.
Just the point that
But maybe Buck can address any, what,
That was when I was talking about the buffers, and it was with contour lines and slopes and things like that, that affect, that extended buffers, modified buffers and such. It really doesn't have anything to do with so much with the 10% rule or anything like that. That's more so the buffers.
but it's just another tool that everything tracks together.
Yes.
I guess.
thank you, Buck. Any more comments from the task force? Go ahead.
I have one more thing here, and it reflects back on what I said before. We're talking about agricultural land, it's a very general term. And I know that there are properties in this county that don't qualify for certain ways of continuing to keep it in agriculture. And what I'm speaking of is like ag preservation versus whether you qualify or you don't. And I still think, although I applaud you guys for your effort on what you're saying, there's got to be some sort of compromise. But you're not taking into the account that there are certain properties in this county that don't qualify for ag preservation. And therefore, how are you going to say which, through a collection of people that might change and make decisions for certain people, which might involve very severe economic consequences for people that own land here, might differ per that group of people that at that time are making the decisions. And I think that the 10% rule, that there are certain ways if people don't want to develop their property, they certainly don't have to. And I think with the greater majority of the property, the ag land in the county, which I believe is about 50% preserved already, I think that if you took the other 50%, probably 30% wouldn't qualify to be preserved. It wouldn't, and the other 20% ain't gonna perk anyway. So why in the world are we having such restrictions on a very small percentage of our property in the county, and those people that don't get the option to put in preservation and do stuff like that? So I find it tough. And I'm not a developer, and I know that there's certain people around here and in this room that are telling people that I am a developer, and I'm not. And I think that that's not at all what I am into. But I think that if somebody wants to create has 130 acres or 160 acres, and they want to create 4 40-acre lots, I don't know why they can't. So I don't, and if I've got certain people on an advisory board or on a commission that's appointed or volunteers, and their beliefs are one way, it's just not fair to those people. So I'm not so sure why we even need the 10% rule, is my position. And so I think we're already preserved here. We can only have a maximum of 7 lots on any agricultural zone property, correct?
No. If you own enough land, you can subdivide to the maximum of your 1 per 30. The county was granted a waiver from the prohibition against major subdivisions in our Tier 4 areas. So we can have major subdivisions in the agricultural zoning district.
But let's clarify what a major subdivision is. Major subdivision also requires certain requirements that almost, that by,
Well,
that just by common sense don't allow you to do it.
but I mean, those major subdivision requirements are going to be on any property in the county.
Correct. How
And
many
yes,
major subdivisions have we done in the last 20 years, 10 years? How many?
Depends on what you define as major, but
I would say taking a farm and busting it all up into 2 acres is a big deal. I mean, I don't see the necessity for it. And I have no interest in living in Middletown and being fair. But I think that you're restricting certain people in this county that own smaller pieces of land. And I don't think it's right that there's a certain amount of people that have big chunks of land control everything that everybody else does. So therefore, I don't see a need for the 10% rule.
Thank you. Any other more task force comments?
Yeah.
Tom?
And I really, Carla, I really like all the work you've put into this. I mean, it's a lot of thought, and I think you're trying to come up with something that compromises that we can all live with. But one of the problems with a waiver is it works like right now, if everybody's on the same wavelength, but you're not going to be here forever. Bill's not going to be here forever. The people on the planning commission, those terms, they're not going to be there forever. So then you get into individual thinking, depending on the individual. And it can work, it might not work, I don't know. None of us know until it happens. The other thing is, right now, a lot of this depends on the size of your farm. If I have a 400, and correct me now if I'm wrong, if I have a 400-acre farm, I can divide 35 acres off of it, right? Okay, if I have a 200-acre farm, I can only take 19 acres off of it. And it's not, and we word this as a development. It's not development, it's agriculture. And I think that's the one place where we've all gotten, we think it's, I mean, the word is that this is development and we're going to create all this development. We're not, we're going to create more farms. And at the same time, I don't see a whole lot of people doing it. But I think we should allow them to do it if they want to do it. I mean, are their own children, they can't do it. I mean, if you have a child that wants to, okay, we milk cows. If one of my, well, I've got a couple of them that say, we're not having anything to do with cows. And say they wanted to put up a greenhouse, but they need dedicated land.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do it.
Well, that's under this you could.
Well, yes, as long as everyone agreed in the waiver process. I mean, right now, yes, you could do it, but 10 years from now, maybe, I don't know if you'll retire in 10 years, I hope not, but you understand what I'm saying, and people on the planning commission, that there's different people, planning director, it's all fine at one point in time, but then if people change, then this whole thing could change. It all gets down to a matter of the size of the farm. There's a lot of small farms in King County.
There's a huge demand for small farms. Everything.
Excuse me, wait, let it finish.
Well, and they're small farms just because that's the way they were. I like what you're thinking here, but I don't know that it's really going to address what we're trying to do. I really don't, I still don't see a need for a 10% rule. If you can find me someone else who has it, I don't know of anyone in the whole United States, is there anybody else that has a 10% rule?
Queen Anne's County has a 15% rule.
A 15% rule?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's better than,
I mean, I'm not sure how it's not applied countywide, but there are certain areas of the county that have what is essentially a 15% rule. I think they call it on the other side that it's like an 85% has to remain in open space, but that means 15% can be developed.
well, it's not, so you can't have agriculture in that 15%. We're not wanting that. We're wanting,
No,
we're wanting agriculture to be in that 15%.
Well, I don't know that they put a restriction on the type of use that's in the 15%.
Well, maybe we should think of it that way.
So they just phrase it as being 85% open space instead of 15% in lots. We could phrase ours as 90% open space.
But maybe we should be thinking the 10% rule, if, and I'm just, making up numbers, if 20 acres comes off, it's staying in agriculture of some kind. Which anything we have, it appears to me in Kent County, it does anyway. When you look around at small parcels, most of them are in agriculture. I mean, like I said before, the 210 farms in Kent County, there are 210 farms in Kent County with FSA numbers that are, they're 20 acres or less. So I don't think, I mean, this isn't to create housing development. This is to help people continue farming. I mean, that's all. That's what it's all about. I mean, we're an agricultural county. We've got to look at this. We got to be a little forward-looking. That agriculture is not going to be the same in Kent County today, 30 years from now, that it is today. I mean, there's going to be different people.
Right.
And we've seen that already in our agriculture. I mean, it's changed over the last 50 years. We don't have dairy farms like we used to. So let's not try, I just don't think we should try to limit people from their passion in agriculture. That's,
Well, thank
I'm
you.
done.
Do we have any comments from the public?
Hi, this is Janet Lewis Christensen.
My name is Paula Reed,
Right.
and I've spoken out against the 10% rule previously, because I believe it's ill-advised. 10% rule is an arcane rule that was adopted for the purpose of preserving open land. The question is whether it works and whether it's right. I don't believe that the staff is proposing adequately acknowledges the concerns voiced by opponents of the 10% rule. And I think it continues to constrain the opportunity to appropriately manage land in this county. The variance process, by its nature.
Excuse me,
Someone,
Ms. Reader. There's someone on the line. Can you mute your phone? We can hear the background chatter. Maybe that did it.
The variance process by its nature caters to people of means who are smart, who understand the rules, and leaves behind, in many respects, people who are less capable of dealing with the complicated and often extended process of pursuing a variance and achieving a variance, receiving a variance. Why should we do that? Why should we make it difficult or more difficult for some people than for others to do what they want to do? The process is also, I think, as Tom and as Billy indicated, fraught with the potential for discrimination, personal discrimination. And that's something we shouldn't allow as far as zoning and the treatment of land use in this county. Over time, people can treat people differently. The variance process has lots of different loopholes and lots of different avenues to pursue, and not all people are treated equally, or potentially not all people are treated equally. In my personal opinion, limiting subdivision of land based on the size of the farm so that some people get to subdivide off 10 acres and some people get to subdivide off 40 acres is inherently discriminatory and shouldn't be permitted. Open land is unquestionably an asset, but it can also be a liability and it can also be a handicap. The limits on personal owners' ability to determine how their land is used not only represents a handicap potentially for the farmer and his or her family, it also represents a handicap for our community. And we've seen that in a number of instances this year. So I hope you will reconsider the input that you've received from opponents of the 10% rule and abandon the variance process and eliminate the 10% rule, which is really doing no one any good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? Janet?
Janet Richardson, Lewis, Millington, Maryland. When I made my comments on the August 25th meeting, I stated that I supported the 10% rule and wanted to see it kept. I, however, didn't add in that I thought that the staff's recommendation was correct and should be followed. And I am amazingly surprised at how well the planning staff has incorporated almost every single one of the issues that have been brought up. Mr. Mason's family, if they so choose to have a separate business, the waiver covers that. Anybody else who has a small farm, who wants to divide off a lot because they have a family member who wants to pursue some other kind of agriculture, the waiver covers that. This task force has to weigh and balance all of the input that comes in. Never are we going to reach some position that is 100% one way or the other. This is a compromise. That's how things work. At the last meeting, the public comment meeting, Commissioner Mason expressed the opinion that no compromise could be found because task force members and the public were either for retaining the 10% rule and his opinion against agriculture or against retention of the rule, period. There appeared, in his opinion, to be no middle ground. And that has continued this evening. I submit to you that this point of view does not represent the spirit of exploration of an acceptable resolution. I would like to know, as a resident of Kent County, that the task force, even if their input is ignored by the Kent County Commissioners, who it has been made apparently clear are the ultimate decision makers, acted together to try to reach a satisfactory compromise. I will end my statement by saying I support the staff's recommendations in regard to the 10% rule, and as a farmer and a major supporter of agriculture in Kent County, I support it.
Thank you. Thank you. Any members of the public online that would like to speak?
Hi, Joe. It's Judy Gifford. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. So I agree with Janet that the staff has done a great job and that I also support their compromise. And I'm a little alarmed at the comments about personalities and people on the staff and on the planning commission can't be trusted. And, you know, we've seen changes over time, and the guiding principle for both of those groups, the staff and the planning commission, is our comp plan and our land use ordinances. So to say that we can't have any flexibility because you don't trust your staff or the public is insane. That just makes no sense. We can't work as a government if we don't trust each other. So I really think that's a false case to make, that we can't trust people to make the right decision. And yeah, that's really kind of alarming to hear people say that in position of power. But and the other thing is, Ms. Reeder says that the variance process is difficult. And as I stated last time we discussed this topic, the variance process is very easy and it's very democratic. And, you know, to say that it's discriminatory, I don't know where the evidence is of that. So I think it's very disingenuous to keep making up these hypothetical what if people can't when there's no evidence. I mean, there was a small farm and Tom Mason bought it. So, I mean, to say that we have small farmers knocking down the door to buy these plots of land, even if they could, the highest bidder's going to get it, or the local landowner, the large landowner, in this case, bought up the 78 acres. So, I mean, we just have to stick with the facts and follow our instincts and trust our people and support the staff compromise. And I think that would be a great solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public? Go ahead.
Elizabeth Watson, I haven't been able to be with you guys as often as I would have liked for some of this. Part of it was that I was working on a project in New Jersey, in a county that's, I feel like I've touched the future, going to a place that allowed a lot of things farmland. They have endeavored and done, I think, extremely well given their circumstances. They started a farmland preservation program in about 1989, and their deer population is up to 50%. Deer damage on crops. And that's because they weren't able to keep a core of farmland where, you know, yes, we got deer everywhere, but kind of that betcha, you're not getting 50% everywhere, not yet, anyway. The subdivision out in, you know, of non-farming areas to a minimum. You've got some wonderful country living out there now, and it's a nice mix, doing well. So I just want to encourage you to think about, you know, the future in terms of how the ecosystem is going to change. The other thing to say is, this is not a program that you should be thinking of as using to expect. It's not a holding program for people who are trying to move into farming. It would be nice if that were happening, but I don't see the county putting forward the money to make sure that everybody who wants to be in that program will get into that program. So you got to be thinking about how you regulate in addition to using land preservation. Entirely in this county, about 35%, about 1/3 of the county is fully protected. That includes ecological preservation as well as farmland preservation. It's a very high number. Kent County is amazingly preserved, and you should be complimented for that. But I think that part of what is happening is that you're also encouraging healthy farming through all of the programs that you've undertaken, which means it makes it longer term more possible to save more farming. So let's hope that you can get to the 50 by 50, 2050, which is what everybody's goal is in the ecosystem. So I want to compliment the staff also and support what you've done for the 2% rural. I agree that it's important to visit this, the ordinance, the land use ordinance that has been so beautifully compiled for your work in the weeks ahead, says that the Planning Commission is going to revisit this as a mandatory thing every 6 years. So I think, this has been a great conversation. I think the staff has really endeavored to look at everything as positively as possible. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments in this room here or online? And more task force, I saw a hand.
Yeah, I'm a little troubled by some of the way people are talking about other people specifically in their comments and everything else. There is ground rules here, and people are stating people's names specifically and what they're saying and stuff to make a point, and I think that's wrong. And I think as chairman, you should stand up and you should put a stop to it.
Thank you, Bill. Bill, I think it's important that when letters were presented and you had heard from letter writers that they didn't understand or didn't agree, that when they were fully explained to them, they did understand. And that's bringing up other people. And I agree with you, that's unnecessary, and I hope you comply with that.
No names said. When I said that, there were no names, the specific names.
Other people is what you said.
Some of the public comment
That's-
there pointing out, making names
Your point
and
is-
certain references of people in the room is wrong.
The public is allowed to comment. I take your word, and that's it. But the task force is the task force, and the staff is the staff. The public is allowed to make comments. I've made my comments. I agree that the staff did a great job looking for a compromise. I think they found it. I appreciate that. One thing, and I will bring this publicly because it was brought by Ms. Reeder, and this is only from my experience, the staff works very hard, and they've done that for 3 planning directors to help anyone that has an application present it properly. You don't need a lawyer. And I think most often when the staff helps you, you're better off to get your a champion trying to get a person what they would like under the land use ordinance. And I just find it disingenuous to say people are untreated unfairly. Our staff has worked very hard through 3 planning directors I've known for anyone to get service, and they're not discriminated against. So, but now you please comment back if you'd like.
Yes, I would. I agree. The staff does an amazing and wonderful job serving the public. But the variance process itself sets up a barrier, no matter how accommodating and helpful the staff may be, to individuals' decisions to move forward on plans or objectives that they would like to see realized. You can't change that. The staff can be as wonderful, as helpful as possible, but if people are not comfortable with the process, they won't attempt to use it. So just keep that in mind, that any time you subject the public to variable treatment, you're going to have incidents of discrimination and failure to achieve what under other land use requirements would be permitted. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to be misinterpreted, and it doesn't sit well with me to be accused of accusing the staff of being less than helpful and accommodating to the public, because I know personally that that's not the case. So don't put that one on me.
You stated that people of lesser means or less education would benefit, and that's what I was, because that's, the staff works with everyone that way. That's what I heard. That's not what I heard, but it was discriminatory based on their ability or their means is what I was heard.
Well, that may be the case. And if they never show up at the door here for those reasons.
That's a false. We don't know what people show up or not, but
Well,
I'll take the question. Thank you.
So as I heard the sighs as I walked up, I just wanted to say, I just think sometimes we take things out of context and we add to it. Someone used the term mistrust the staff. I didn't hear anyone say that. I just heard that there will be different staff and everybody approaches things differently. I didn't hear anyone say staff was distrusted. And then to call someone disingenuous is basically saying they're lying. And I do have a concern with that. And I do feel like everybody should be able to speak out without being judged. And I feel like we are bullying a lot of people into not speaking up. And I think that's very, very sad for our community. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a comment?
Do I?
You said something.
I agree 100% with Jamie. I never heard anything about questioning it or trying to put anybody blame on the planning commission. Everybody in here supports the planning commission. Nobody said mistrust like you just said. So stop trying to put words and a reflection on what certain people are doing. It's not right, Joe. Stop.
Excuse me. I'll stand by what I said.
You will listen to the recording.
Go ahead.
Joe, and I guess I need to comment because I think I was objective here of a couple of these, and I need to correct some things. One of them is, I talked to a farmer today who is not happy with the variance process. And I think you know probably who I'm thinking about. I'm not going to mention a name. I don't think we want to get into names. The variance process is easy if it goes your way. It's not easy if it doesn't. And the other comment that I bought this small farm that was 78 acres. Well, first, it's 80 acres. And the farm was for sale. We made an offer on it. They accepted our offer, refused one that was higher. Now, that's not my doing. That was their choice. Anybody could have made an offer on this farm. And I don't see where I should be criticized because I bought this farm. And the thing about, I did not say our staff could not be trusted. What I said was we may not have the same staff and we don't know what will happen in the future. I think our staff today is very good and can be trusted. But we've got to look beyond today. We're doing something here that's going to be around for a while. And I just think we're losing we're trying to look at it just for today. And we got to think beyond that. This what we're doing right now may be here after we're all gone. Because we don't we're supposed to, I think, do this every 10 years. But how long has it been? Pretty near 20. So you see what I'm saying? We got to look at this as something that's going to be here a while. And I also, we've got to stop this thing of attacking people.
I agree with that.
Attacking people. There's no reason to mention any names. And And the other thing that concerns me from the meeting before, we had two individuals, and I'm not going to mention their names. I think everybody here was here that night, that stated, we only want large farms in Kent County. Now, that is really concerning. We only want large farms in Kent County. So that makes you think, then this 10% rule doesn't mean anything to them, or they want to definitely keep that. Because a large farm to small farm, in most cases, a large farmer, whatever that is, and I don't know what that is really, he was a small farmer at one time and he grew into a large farmer. But small or large, we are probably considered a large farmer. I don't really think of myself as a large farmer, but with 700 cows in Kent County, Maryland, that's a large farmer, I guess, in Kent County. But if I was in California, I'd be the smallest peanut in the shell. So it's all a matter of where you are and all that. But I just don't see where we're. And as far as coming up with some compromises work both ways. The people that want these large farms, are they going to come back and say, no, we're all right with a small farm? Somewhere we've got to, those are compromises too. And enough said. I don't know how we keep going back and forth on this whole thing, and Carla and Bill, they're trying to compromise with something that makes everybody happy. But when it gets all said and done, I would hope that a person could come into this building and say, I'd like to buy this on a farm, and not be, well, it's got to go to this group, it's got to go to that group, it's got to go to some other group, and 4 months later, you still may not know anything. And meanwhile, the person who has the farm, he's wanting to do something. And he may not have 4 months. He may not have 3 months. He ought to have the right then, from personal property rights, to help another farmer. And I'm still back to, I don't know why we want to stop farming and criticize farmers that are not in your same category. Enough said.
Okay.
I don't think the compromise was trying to say that we're not allowing the smaller farm. I thought the whole idea here with the compromise was to give a little from each side in order to reach some kind of an agreement so we can move forward and still retain the 10% rule. And as with regard to in the future, Tom, I will call your name out because you did say this about in the future, we don't know who's going to be on staff. We don't know who's going to be on the planning commission. But if the rules are the rules, they're going to be following the rules. I don't think it's so subjective that the planning commission or the staff can just willy-nilly make decisions as they see that, as they personally want things to be. I think they really have to follow the nuances of the rules. So, yeah, things will change. You do have staff. The helpfulness may change, but I really don't anticipate that. I really don't. But that would be one thing, but that doesn't mean you still wouldn't get the okay to move forward with whatever you wish to do. Obviously, you were around here when we moved here. We weren't greeted with open arms at first. We had to go through the planning commission. We had people on the planning commission speaking out against us. And yet we still, the planning commission had to follow the rules because we were following all the things that were required of us to move here and put in a hog operation. And the planning commission voted to allowed us to put in a hog operation, and therefore we moved here. But there were people on the planning commission itself who personally did not want us to be here. Yet the planning commission as a whole voted yes to allow it because we met every requirement that the special exception required.
Thank you. Any more members of the task force? Albert?
I just want to say that I think the staff did a really good job. With the recommendation that I personally
Thank you for a concise comment. And anyone else have any more comment? We've gone back and forth. I think,
I do,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Cindy. Go ahead.
if I can. I also wanted to commend the staff for drafting this new proposed section of the ordinance. It takes a lot to draft legislation and to think about all the contingencies and then what are the processes that are involved. So, they worked hard on putting this together. And it seems to me it comes down to whether you want to have the compromise or not, whether the task force wants to have this compromise. And there are some considerations to further examine, I think, which goes to, I think, Ms. Reeder's point. When she was talking about discrimination, I thought that what she was speaking to was the ability in the agricultural zoning district to carve out a lot for a family member, whereas other zoning districts in the county, that won't be possible. So that is a difference between people who own land in the agricultural zoning district versus the rest of the county. So that's what I was thinking you were speaking to. Maybe I was wrong. And then the other point I wanted to make was these concepts are good concepts. They're the ones you came up with, but they're somewhat nebulous right now in what's proposed. I mean, estate planning and settlement is a really broad term. So how many lots do you get? What family members get a lot? And same thing with specialized agricultural operations. I mean, that would have to be defined, I think. And then as far as the process, what I saw in here was the Planning Commission, in considering a waiver of the 10% rule for a particular circumstance, would have to make certain findings. Would those be in addition to the normal findings they have to make for a subdivision? Would it be a concurrent process? Would the waiver process take place during the subdivision process? Maybe that's worth fleshing out. So I do think if the task force decides that they want to go forward with this process, that what's proposed or what changes might later be proposed probably merit a good legal analysis before we get to the final, which is probably what you had in mind anyway, before we get to the final version. But those were some areas that I thought could use some thought by everyone, not just staff.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it.
Just because it's so much work.
Oh.
So to think through, and staff has so much on their plate right now, to think through all those contingencies, spend the time putting it down, and then it's either decided, oh, we're not going to go with this, or there are some areas that really need further fleshing out. It can be a huge task, and I don't know, maybe it's something the consultant could get involved with, depending on what the budget is for that.
Very good. Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate it. Any further comments?
I'd like to add a few things, but could we take a break first, and then when we come back, I'll talk technical stuff?
Yes, we. Buck, are you still on the 10% or you on other topics? I'm sorry.
10%.
Okay. We can, let's get back at 7:30. That's 10 minutes.
Probably. I'm not gonna call you by name.
And just as we note always, the live stream continues, so.
Ford Hall, yes, you're up at the marina. Oh, you were? Okay, yeah, I could not remember any places. I think these might be.
It gets real stuff when you're in and certain things that go on, there's a certain crowd. Certain people planning commission. It's how do we make this so that it's just gonna come up with something. It's reasonable and fair. The small guy, the big guy, the medium guy, the guy that can't do certain things, and I think that that's what we have to do. Honestly, if you're a farmer, you don't care what the 10% is. Just make sure you get all your money back and you can buy another farm. I mean, I'd love to be in that position. So, anyway, I just
Things run too long, man. This whole process is going on too long. It seems like
they're standing. They have what they have. Yep. And they don't want anybody else to have it. And it's not fair. It's not, I mean, it's just not right for the person. What he wants can get it. There's not a soul in the game. But you can't even go and find a pair of underwear in Chestertown. You know, you gotta have something going on. And you know, and being in the life, putting on preservation, and getting to the, you know, having your money back, and then you buy another farm. And no wonder they're all. Yes, it's a business of it. And it's not right. That's not right. You should be limited to a certain amount you can do. Or that's when they get different LLCs and they do all this and that. I just don't agree with it. I can tell you, you talk to your grandson, you put on any 5 to 25 to 40 acre parcels you put on the market won't last a week on the market, and it sells for more property, more price, and it's got a higher tax income coming in to the county from it. And there's a, you know, what's wrong with that?
It's all about a money game, you know.
Tell me any 10 or 12 acre tillable piece of ground anywhere that isn't tilled. Now you can't show me.
Well, there were some years back, they went to these farmettes. And then when they did that, people, I think they were 20 acres. Well, time you put a fence around it, you gotta have something new, plaster it off or something. Because some of them got tired of fooling with it, and then they wanted to neighbor farmer to come in and till it. How's it gonna get that big?
You just gotta take the fence down.
You know what I mean?
You just gotta take the fence down. I mean, but it's.
Time you get in there and drop the thing in the ground, you're ready to.
I know, but you still.
So it doesn't have to be tilled crop, row crops. It can be a lot of other things.
I'd still challenge you to go around this county and you find me an ag piece of ground that isn't farmed, that doesn't have cows or livestock. Yep. You can't find it. I've driven everywhere around. You can't tell me that you cut them down for whatever or give other people opportunities to come in here, build our tax base up more. I'd come here too, if I could buy a farm, but nobody can buy a farm anymore.
The working man can't.
No. And the higher the price of land goes, the more money you get for preservation. You know that too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But you got, the other thing is you got the prove orders. You haven't got the prove, the research.
Yeah.
These people, in those areas, you know,
What you got, you got kid preservation rights, that scare everybody, and that's not good. And he runs the meeting like he owns the county.
who's the gentleman there, you know? He's a guy there. I don't know.
I think it is. I think it's.
I haven't seen him for years.
He always is put together and dressed, you know, gentleman, I would say. When you,
Yeah, when I was commissioner, or even before that, he was, he was collecting trash, I think. He could get in a verbal scrap with
yeah, there's no doubt about that. Well, you know, look, I look at myself, okay? I'm not gonna stand, and I got nothing, I'm not gonna stand for one person being, call somebody's name out and talk and say their piece, and another person not being shut down. We're equal. And if and that's what going on here. I mean, look, you got Vice President, Kevin President, you got Pat Miller, President, you got Joe Evans, something Secretary, you got Elizabeth Watson, whatever they are. That you got Judy Gibbons, whatever. And you got this, and you take those people off. And who's in here fighting against it? Nobody. And now the other thing I'll tell you, Janet Pierce is talking about her husband here because he's out there cutting beans. He ain't cutting beans. He's cutting weeds because it's all organic. They're spreading weeds all over the county. But that's okay. That's why they can't cut it. Am I right?
He was like that cutting.
Yes.
Just the weed bonds off the tree, real on the combine.
He just put in a mile long asphalt line. If he was that worried about it, he don't put asphalt down. Isn't that a big thing with your impervious surface?
He didn't get all his money out of it.
He didn't get any of it. No, none of it.
None of it.
Zero. I don't go for all that BS.
The average working person don't come in here. First, they wouldn't have come in here for, what, a year and a half now? So we're messing in here, they wouldn't, it's supposed to be, I tell myself, well, every time I come.
Well, I don't know what I'm doing here. The reason I signed, or I agreed to do it, was because I figured it was time in my life I did a civic duty, contributed something. That's the only reason I did
Well,
it.
see, that's a good idea, but you guys been faithful for this. Some of them not attending now, until like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
They were all here.
Yep, they don't have them, no.
I mean, he got, I just would like to see, it's got enough stuff in language now. We've got some variables, all they need to do is log it in. You know, the whole process. Some of them gonna need waivers, some won't, some will have available, some won't.
Yeah, I mean, and it depends who's on the committee, whether you can get a waiver. A variance is a judgment. It's not a definitive rule. That's why they call it a variance. You have to prove a hardship or something, more hardship to one person than a hardship to another.
He says, I just want that planning commission, even before we were trying to move here. He goes, and I was trying to make a motion to let you come in.
I just said the same thing.
You did, you on that?
How you doing?
I'm sure, no, you would have been three problems.
No, I said I would have said the same thing he just told you.
Yeah.
Yeah, not too bad. How you doing?
See,
Just old and stiff.
Yeah, I feel the same way.
You're Ford Hall.
Ford Hall, right, yeah.
That's what I thought, actually.
You're up, Galena.
Yeah, Georgetown, yeah. So, do you still have cows?
We got a few, yeah.
Do you really?
Yeah. We're not milking any, we're just
Oh, you're
got some
not?
feeder animals, and, you know, some crossbreeds and that kind of stuff.
Oh, I see. Are they pets? Is that what you're saying?
No, they're not pets. We sell them on the beef market, meat market.
Oh, I see.
You know, different sizes of them.
Oh, I see.
So, and your son running your business?
Huh?
Your son, you got a son running
Yeah,
your
no, Ralph did, about a year and a half ago, he quit, moved to Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to come out of retirement and take over the business again. So I think I have it sold. I'm not 100, you know, you never know until you get to the settlement table. Yeah, Georgetown Outpost. It's under contract to sale. So you never quite know if you're gonna get to the settlement table or not.
You never know, and it gets worse anymore now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm doing it every day. It's crazy with some of the.
Some of the contract terms are really
You
peculiar.
gotta keep things simple. And you know, one thing I learned, I'm 61 now, and it was always a challenge to say the word no. You know, when somebody said, well, see, it doesn't take this.
Yeah.
The sooner you say no, the sooner it's over. And that's been one of the greatest things I ever learned with negotiation. And you know, telling your person that you're working with or representing up front how this process is going to go alleviates so much. You know, it just, the more steps you have to go through to meet the middle, there's more chance for something to blow up.
One of the terms not with this contract example, but an earlier one, and this is a contract term I had never heard about. So this was of course, you know, in the contract, the seller certifies that everything they said is true and all the documents they produced are true and all this stuff, yeah. So, you know, that's fine, I understand that. But then this particular contract had a 10% retaining, so in other words, they took 10% of the sale price and put it in escrow, and then they had a year after they settled, if they find any discrepancy, then they can take the money out of the escrow.
Yeah, that's not
And I
happening.
thought to myself, that's just gonna be.
That's 10% you're not gonna get.
Exactly.
So you say the best, you might agree to that, but you say to the best of my knowledge. That's what you would add into that. Or I think I would. Yes, everything I've said is true. And everything I've presented you is fact, to the best of my knowledge. I think that would cover you in a lot of ways, or else you just say, no, I'm not selling that.
But that's what I finally ended up doing, to say, we're not gonna sell that term, but I thought to myself, that 10% is gone. I mean, they're gonna
kiss that away.
They're just gonna dream up stuff and say, oh, this and that, and, you know, this is $30,000, and this is another 30,000, another 30,000, next thing you know, it's gone.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
Where is Buck? Did he take off?
It's simple is better. Simple and
That's his
everything,
cousin.
less involved. And you know, a residential contract's like 29 pages. Some of them get up to 42. And it's just unnecessary.
I agree. But
I tell you what though, it's been good. It's been good in the last 2 years. It's been great.
Go get back, excuse me. We want to reconvene if we can, please. When we left, we were still on 10% rule, and I recognized Mr. Nickerson.
Nope.
Oh, there you go. Like Ms. Pat, everybody said, I agree wholeheartedly on the compromise. I think it was great. I wanted to make sure that I understood things correctly. I wanted to throw a scenario at you, Carla, to make sure that I've got it in my head straight. And when I asked you this, I'm also kind of helping people understand.
Yep.
So let's just say that back in 2000, before the 10% rule kicked in, that I had a 100-acre farm, which meant that I had 3 development rights, 2 lots and the remainder. So in 2000, I decide to use one of those development rights, and I carve off a 2-acre lot in the corner, and I sell it to Albert. Today comes along, this ordinance has been changed to the way you propose. Albert comes to me and says, Buck, I'd really like to buy 60 acres or 59 acres off of this, my side here, because let's just say there's a stream that divides it. So I could sell him 59 acres and of my 100 acres and administratively add it into his lot?
Yes, because the subdivision occurred prior to August 19th, 2003.
Okay. And that's the way I understood it. So now let's say, so now I've used one development right. He has 60 acres, I have 40 acres. Who gets the remaining development right?
He would, because he has 60.
Okay. Is that written in stone in the ordinance?
No, it is generally assumed that the larger piece is the one that keeps any remaining development rights.
Okay. Because I had a situation like this in Queen Anne's County, and they had in their ordinance that the parent tract retains the development right. Again, it doesn't matter either way, but I think it's a scenario that could come up, and it should probably be spelled out. It doesn't matter, in my opinion. I'm of the opinion, I kind of agreed with Queen Anne's, and I'd like to have input that the parent tract retains the development right, but either way would be fine. And I would also like to bring up, and again, just to maybe for a little further discussion, the 10% rule applies to agriculture, and I understand about fragmenting farms and all of that. Under the definition of agriculture, woods does not count. Obviously, farming practices, all that do. I don't know whether there could be some kind of an exception made for woodland, since it doesn't really qualify under the definition of agriculture, if that would apply. And that's
my take on that in putting this together is that something like separating woods from the rest of the land would fall under natural features,
okay.
allowing a waiver based on dividing the land on natural features. Now, there might be a way to better clarify that so that if you've got 25 acres of woods and you only want to sell 20 of them and so 5 acres stay on the remainder, that's not necessarily following a natural feature in terms of how you might interpret it along a streamline or along a wood edge. So there might be reason to add in some more clarification to address concerns about interpretation in the future.
And that's same goes with the buffer. With this, the more black and white we make it, I think it's better for everybody now and in the future.
Yep.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you, Buck.
Go ahead. Could I ask for a clarification on that? So if I have a farm, can I sell the woods? I mean, we're not talking about 10% rule. Hey, I have a 100-acre farm. I can't sell. Let's make it easy. 200-acre farm. I can't sell 10 acres of woods.
Yeah, well, you could, because it would fall within the 10%.
Right.
So the 10% rule is only one aspect of the whole subdivision process. So in the agricultural zoning district, the base density is 1 dwelling unit per 30 acres.
30.
So that's the first thing you have to look at in terms of, can somebody even subdivide their property?
Right.
Then the next thing you look at is, how does the 10% rule apply? Or are they exempt under the current language, which is now if it's all tracts are over 100 acres, then it doesn't apply. Anything less than that, then it does.
Right. So you can sell the woods. I could sell that 10 acres of woods.
Yes, you could do a subdivision.
I mean, just like if it was 10 acres of tillable land or 10 acres of woods, is it looked at the same?
It's looked at yes. When we're drawing the property lines, we're not looking at what the features of the land
Right,
are. We're
right.
looking
Well,
at,
that's what I thought.
does it meet the size requirements? Does it meet the density? You know, is the health department okay? Have you,
Right.
the
Well,
width, I mean, it's.
Well, what I'm looking at there is, and I think there's demand for this in King County, is there's hunters that they could care less about if it has any tillable land, but man, we like those woods because we harvest deer off of them, okay? So they might pay more for the woods than they would the land, I don't know. But, I mean, I think that's part of the issue too. I think with all this, we're losing and I think I've said this, we're selling agricultural land that's going to be in farming. And maybe the word should be on this 10% rule that it's got to remain in farming. You can't buy this 35-acre parcel and plant it all in grass. I mean, I don't know who'd want to do that to mow. It's going to have to still be farmed, just like they all are. Most are farmed in Kent County, but it's still going to be farmed. Well, and farming is a broad thing. It might be they might put it in grass to have horses. I don't know. But if we say that's a compromise. We say it's got to be farmed, then that does away with this fear that suddenly it's all going to become houses. They might have a home on it. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's still going to be farmed. Someone's going to farm it, either they are themselves or a local farmer in the county. And what's wrong with that? I mean, that's.
This is a legal question maybe, but there's if remain in farming, you either deed restrict it or you turn it over to the planning commission, planning staff to enforce. That would be a concern of mine, is that how you do that.
Right.
If you deed restrict it, it's like putting an easement on a farm. It's got to be farmed. I mean, but that's, I think that would impede people wanting to do it because they don't want to buy something that's for deed. Like we talk about, what's the future bring?
Well,
you have to plant a row crop in it or something.
In King County, we don't want it to be deed restricted. Because I tried to do that. I tried to put a deed restriction on the 35 acres, which was over the 10% of the farm. I said, oh, no, we don't want that in King County. I said, it's going to remain in agriculture. I will sign whatever you need me to sign. Oh, no, we don't want that. So I'm like, I'm confused.
Well, I don't know who that was. I mean, that was.
Well, that was.
The planning staff doesn't have.
Well, that was from.
Tom, was this,
I don't want to get into all that.
Was this the example where it's bisected by a road?
Was what now?
Where you wanted to buy.
Yeah, it was
somebody wanted to
bisected
buy
by a
land that
road.
was bisected by a road.
Yep, which was another reason I couldn't come up with.
And that's what we were trying to address here, to make it possible for people to do that with no restrictions.
And I think that's good, but I think we also need to, even if it's not bisected by a road, make it possible to, everyone cannot afford a 300-acre farm or a 200-acre farm. But there's people that have a passion to farm, and if they can get that start on the 20 acres, who knows what they might be 30 years from now. I mean, I don't know, but I've said enough.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment?
Go ahead. One quick thing, and it brings it up. I don't think this is controversial, I don't think. But when you have a piece of land and you have 180 acres, and this has happened to me, numerous times selling land to major farmers in the area. And they look at the farm and they say to me, they say, well, we don't want woodland, we're farmers. Okay, well, you still gotta buy the woodland. But with the 10% rule, it doesn't really allow that farmer and even give a younger farmer a chance. Like, wouldn't be a better opportunity for whoever's buying that 180 acres to sell off that 80 acres of woods to a deer hunter or somebody else? Because believe me, and you know this too, that woodland is bringing about 3/4 the price of tillable land right now. It's crazy. So there is value to it. But if I'm a farmer and I want to buy that piece of ground, I can't, why is somebody telling me I can't sell off that 80 acres of woods? It's not going into houses. It might not even perk. It's still going to bring $70,000 an acre right now. And I think that that's what we're not thinking about, certain situations that do crop up and that we're faced with every day, and nobody ever understands it until they come in here and they, why wouldn't you be able to sell off that 80 acres if you're a row crop farmer and you want to buy that farm? I can tell you that there's numerous very large owners in this county that have made that statement to me. And I think that it's a hindrance. Why wouldn't they be allowed to do that? I can't think of a reason. So I think there's other issues here besides the argument of one side versus the other of 10% rule, not 10% rule. And therefore, I think that some sort of compromise is fine. But in that compromise, I think it's got to be, you can't leave it to the judgment of whoever's going to make the decision at whatever time, whether it's next week or 15 years down the road, because it changes so much. Look at the change we've all experienced. And so I think it has to be spelled out. So having it here, but a variance is a decision based on opinions for the most part. So I don't see that really works. I think it's got to be cut and dry, and you got to say what it is and what it isn't. And that simplifies things. That was the whole point of this whole task force with the gentleman that came in here and spoke in the beginning, the consultant, was that this needs to be simplified. So I think that that's the most important thing we can do. But adding more stuff where it's more complicated and more people have to come together and have a meeting, and it's got to be 3 weeks later, and they can't have another meeting for another 6 weeks because it's too complicated. Simplify it. And that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak? Go ahead.
I don't mean to speak for Carla, but it seems to me that the scenario that was just laid out about somebody having a farm and wanting to sell off the woodland lot would be covered under a natural, what's it called, Carla?
Feature.
Natural features.
Feature.
So that would be taken care of. And secondly, as I listen to the land use rights and the discrimination, it would appear as if we want to have a situation where we don't have any zoning regulations. Because that would allow everybody to do exactly what they want with their property whenever they want to do it, with not having to go to the planning department, not having to go through any kind of process for whatever it is that we want. And I would just say that that might, in fact, result in chaos. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else online like to speak? I think I appreciate Carl and Bill, the staff's effort on there, but we've heard a lot of opinions. Bill, where do you want to go next? Close to adjournment, I think, for most of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I just want to remind everybody that based on our discussion at our last meeting, our next meeting will be on Thank you. December the 8th at 6 PM. At that time, we hope that we will have a presentation from our consultant. He will be using this base document to work on the changes as put forth in the diagnostic report, to focus on those changes that revolve around comp plan, et cetera, and those various recommendations that he made earlier. So we hope to have that out to you as soon as possible. That's probably the end of November is as soon as possible, and ready for the meeting. So that's what it will, and then that will be our only meeting in December, since the second meeting would fall very close to the holidays. So we scheduled that not to occur. So that's what we're looking at for next steps. I appreciate, and I would like to thank everyone who said such kind words. We appreciate that. The team works very hard, and it's nice to hear compliments. So thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.